Good morning, everyone. I haven't really done too much filming since we got the crops planted. It's been a couple of weeks now. It's May 15th? Not sure. It's right around May 15th. And I would have to stop this and check to get the exact date. But anyway, today finds me out in the potato patch, which has been neglected since we planted it. You probably saw that in an earlier segment. We just kind of quick threw this in while we were getting prepped for planting corn and soybeans. And the weeds consequently took over, which they want to do when you establish a new patch. We had tilled up a new piece of ground for potatoes because where we had our potato patch in the past was always getting flooded. Of course, now we haven't gotten any rain this year, but you can't foresee that. So anyway, this new patch has got a lot of grass and stuff coming up in it. And we're supposed to get rain here in a little bit, maybe a couple hours. It's supposed to roll in for the first time in a while. We could really use it. And I'm trying to get these potatoes weeded out before the rain comes in. So that's what we're up to, and I'll kind of show you from a different perspective. And then if I have time, I'll walk you through a little field walk before it starts raining, but only if I have time, because if it starts pouring on me, I'm going to call her quits. So here you can kind of see what I've done. I've got 3 rows pretty well cleaned up. I just sort of locate the potatoes by hand because they're just sprouting. Everything's been so slow to come up. Our corn has been, over 10 days now. It's probably going on, well, actually, if it's the 15th today, then it's 15 days and it's just coming up now. So it's been pretty slow to emerge. And everything else too. When we planted these potatoes, they would normally be up pretty quickly, but it's just because we haven't had any moisture. We are running a pretty good deficit on rainfall now. So anyway, those 3 rows are done, and I've got 3 more to do, and then a little partial row that's hidden in the weeds there somewhere. And once I get these all sorted out, figure out where the rows are, because I've kind of lost them now, my intention is to cut a bunch of grass, either some of this here, or I may even venture out into the meadow and cut a bunch of grass and mulch it really heavily, especially in between the rows. I'll leave it a little lighter where the plants are so that they can get up and get some sunlight. But I want to mulch real heavily in between the rows, and that should cut down the amount of weeding we need to do. And then when these potatoes would typically need to be hilled, rather than dig down and dig up the dirt and hill them, I probably will just add more and more mulch to try to get them to produce a little extra for us, but also not have to go digging in the dirt too much and not have to dig through the layer of mulch I'll have already put down. I really want to try to focus on using a lot of mulch this year around the farm and in our own garden for weed suppression. Just because otherwise it gets into too much handwork when there's other things to do. So hopefully I can do this one really thorough weeding pass. We get some rain today, mulch everything real good, and then be done with that process for a while. We can just watch these grow and watch for potato bugs. And then that brings me to project number 2 for the day, which is that old girl. So you can clearly see Dad did a little bit of burning. He had some residue. That's where our sweet corn always was planted there, but again, the pond has come up so high. We moved the sweet corn patch this year to a place that wasn't going to be threatened by water. And anyway, he was using the M and shut her down there, did what he was doing, and then when he went to start it, it wouldn't start. And that happened one other time, so I managed to get it going the other time. I couldn't figure out why it started up for me. Seemed like an electrical problem, and so now today I brought my electrical kit out and sure enough found that we had a wire that was just about burned off, and when I tugged on it a little, it broke right off. And it's the wire that feeds from the battery right to everything else for the tractor. So I am going to replace that in a little bit here. All right, 3 hours later and that job is done. The next task is going to be to mulch these rows, but first I got to get the M running, so. All right, so here we have the old M. If we walk in and zoom in here, there's the battery, which normally sits there. And the positive cable is connected to this post, but then there's also a wire right here that comes off of there, and that's what takes power up to the junction box there, or whatever you want to call it, switch box, gauge cluster. I'm not sure. I can only apply modern terms to a very old part, but we're going to take the cover off of that, and then once that wire comes into that box, then it gets distributed around. It goes through the amperage gauge and routes power off to the lights and down to the push button switch. So we just have to replace that. And I think probably what happened is that old wire just corroded off, and it might have also had too much power being pulled through it. It's kind of a small gauge wire, especially when the lights were turned on. I was using the lights this past winter and blew a fuse, and I'm pretty sure it's because we've put, 55 watt halogens in here. They should probably be switched to LEDs just for the simple fact that they draw a lot less power and put less strain on a system that was never designed for that much candle output anyway. So it'll help either way by putting a heavier gauge wire. I've got a 10 gauge wire that I'm going to use in place of that one. I think that was maybe a 12 or a 14. All right, so we've got our gauge cluster pulled out and our wire isolated. It's this one right here. So we'll get that removed. I've got a new coil of wire with an end already ready to go back on the back side of the starter switch. We'll get that portioned out for length and get it reattached. Just let the record show this thing had been burned through a couple of times by various shorts and it had just been taped up. So, in a quick fix situation, I could have just put a new end on here and been done with it, but I think it was probably time for replacement. All right, everything's switched out. Let's see if she'll fire up. The M going. I'll clean up my tools here. We'll do a little bit of a field walk. Okay, the M's all put away and the tools, and let's go take a look at what's going on in the fields here. I did check the date. It's the 16th of May. I was close, off by one day. It's hard to tell what's going on now with these schedules so disrupted all over the place. But going out into the big 18-acre field here. Big being a relative term. And here it is. If we were growing a cereal rye crop, it would be really nice. Except for that wet spot there. But clearly the cereal rye is doing very well and has gotten itself well established. But the corn is taking quite a while to come up. And that I'm attributing to just a simple lack of moisture. I did dig down yesterday or 2 days ago. Can't quite remember. I think it was 2 days ago. And I did locate the corn kernels. They're all germinating, but they're still about a ½ inch below the surface. Maybe by today, there might be some coming up. I'm going to take a look here. All right, so here we've got a corn seedling and another one here. So they are just starting to poke up. I had to take a walk down into a low area where there's a little more residual moisture. I started out up on that hill there, and there's nothing coming up there. It's quite a bit drier. So we really need a shot of rain to speed things along. We'll have a little bit inconsistent emergence. As you can see, we're growing a real healthy crop of ragweed in here too, which is not surprising. This field had a big problem with that last year. You can refer back to one of my earlier videos, maybe I'll even put a little tag in here, where we had just a massive ragweed issue in this field. I was hoping the cereal rye would compete with it, and maybe it did. You can never tell if we hadn't put a cover crop in if the ragweed would be even worse, because now you're talking about speculation. But I can see that it's pretty severe. So when Dad comes in to terminate this cover crop, his worry was that with our sprayer, we don't have any kind of guidance. So normally you would terminate a cereal rye cover crop the day you plant. Ours was so poorly established that I figured there wouldn't be any harm in letting it go a little bit longer. And we're not really concerned about maximum yield on the corn either, especially if I can market it, more of it for wildlife feed, that would help. So anyway, Dad was worried that if he tried to come in and terminate this, he wouldn't be able to see where the rows were. He couldn't really tell where the planter rows are right after planting because you're in this green cover crop and it's no-till, so it's hard to see where you've been. So we figured we'd let it go a little bit and let the corn emerge and then terminate the cover crop. But the corn's been so slow emerging that Dad still would have trouble seeing where he's been already with the sprayer. And so he could miss areas or overlap more than he needs to. We don't have foam markers or anything, and it's just a little Clark sprayer that'll do 8 rows at a time. So interestingly enough, now we've gotten to the point where you can actually see the banded fertilizer in the cereal rye. So he's got a way to tell where the rows are now. You can see when you look down the field that that band of fertilizer that's offset from the corn rows is making the cereal rye more green and darker colored. So we're gonna wait for this rain to come through today, and then he should be able to come in and terminate this. We're supposed to have a couple of warm, sunny days, which would be ideal for spraying this off. And I guess by giving it a little bit of extra time for that ragweed to come up, he's gonna hit this with glyphosate to terminate the cereal rye and anything that's not resistant to glyphosate. And then he's going to throw some 2,4-D in as well, and that should burn down these little ragweed seedlings. And hopefully, if we're lucky, maybe we've only got one flush of ragweed and we won't have to spray again. Our ultimate goal here is, I mean, to get away from herbicides completely, but if we can get it right to where he can come in, burn everything off with one pass, and then if the corn can get to V2, V3, and we're ready to put in our interseeded cover crop, and not have to hit it with any more herbicide, in a perfect world, that would be where we'd want to be. Just one pass. We've got no pre-emerge on here or anything like that because of the cover crop. So one pass with a 2-chemical mix and we'd be done. Will it work? I don't know. Maybe. I guess everything's a wait and see kind of situation, but that would be really great if it did. So then here's our alfalfa field, which is about 6 acres. This is its final year before we're gonna switch it out of the rotation. It's looking pretty good. It's coming along. There's, you know, it's not as pure anymore after a few years. So there's some other stuff in here. We got a fair number of dandelions, which Dad hates and I say is not really a big deal. Some tufts of other native grasses and things coming up, but it should give us a nice crop. So end of May, beginning of June, we'll be making hay. That's always exciting. And I know it's sort of like having dandelions in a lawn, which most people get wild and crazy about, but at the end of a hayfield's life, it's not the worst thing. They got a good deep taproot for breaking up compaction. They're good for the pollinators, which these days need all the help they can get. So, and they don't really compete too much, I don't think. So in the realm of weeds, I'd rather have them than some others. I'll take dandelions over ragweed any day. At least they have some benefit. All right, and now behind me, you see the one field we have left to plant, which was in corn last year and is going to go into teff grass this year. Teff, this will be our first experience planting teff. It does not like the cold weather. Today's actually fairly chilly. I think it would be a bad day to have teff grass growing. It's Ethiopian in origin, and so it likes warm, dry kind of conditions. It's supposed to make really good horse hay, good annual hay crop. And we make hay and try to sell it to horse people. We try to make good quality hay for that reason. So this is kind of a new road that we're going to go down and give it a shot. You can see Dad has disked this field. And I know our goal around here is no-till and cover crops. And we've been trying to adhere to that as careful as we can. We did have to do a little disking for some of the soybean ground because we just couldn't get the drill in. But so Dad has disked this up, and the reason for that is that the only way we think we can plant the teff seed is with a brilliant seeder. The seed is very, very small. In fact, if you get uncoated seed, it's almost microscopic. It's really hard to differentiate, you know, how you get that metered out correctly in a drill. So we bought coated seed just simply because it adds a little more bulk to it and should make it easier to try to calibrate and get it metered out right. So our local soil and water district has a brilliant seeder that we can rent for a reasonable price, and we have that reserved already for, I believe, next week. We've got our seed, so Dad's gonna disc this one more time. He's setting the disc lightly so that he's just evening things out and breaking up the surface a little bit. And after all last year's rain and the surface compaction, it's just something that we gotta do to get this crop in. So we're hoping that the teff, which should grow pretty thick and doesn't have the deepest root system, but just by maybe sheer volume, it'll help break that compaction up and give us a little variety, give us a hay crop for the year. And then at the end of the year, we're gonna, that teff should terminate itself because it will not survive the Minnesota winter. And we're gonna put alfalfa in. So we'll direct seed that as well and let that get established next year. So that'll supply us with our new alfalfa field once we take the other one out of the rotation. That's all I'm going to show you for now. We could go look at the soybeans, but there's nothing to see. We planted those, as you know, with the no-till drill and dragged to the field. They are planted pretty shallow. They don't have any access to any soil, residual soil moisture, so they are not coming up. They're just sitting there and waiting. And so there's nothing to show you in the soybean fields. I'm hoping that with this rain we're going to get, that'll give them a jump start and get them going. Once they can get some roots down, they'll be able to tap into some of that subsurface moisture. So that's it for today. That's our update. May 16th, rolling along. Off to a pretty good start, really. I can't complain. Well, as a little postscript to my video for today, we just got home, and here it is. Sweet, sweet rain. They're saying we might get up to 2 inches, and we could use every bit of that. And it's perfect. It's coming down nice and gentle and slow paced. It's supposed to take all of tonight and into tomorrow. So this is exactly what we needed. It's a perfect rain, and it's coming at just the right time. So I am, after the psychological trauma of all the rain we got last year, I'm finally ready to be happy about rain again. and we can celebrate it and enjoy it tonight.